It's 4:40 in the morning, pitch black, Bay of Biscay. A British bomber is flying on dead reckoning, meaning the crew can't see their target, their radar can't see their target, they're aiming at empty darkness on pure faith in their own math. 5 minutes from now, a German submarine that has survived a year-long patrol, sunk 14 ships, and outlived every tactic the Allies have thrown at it, is going to die. Tonight, and the reason isn't a new bomb, it isn't better radar. It's a 24-inch searchlight bought with no budget, built without permission, fitted to the plane by a man whose actual job was filing paperwork. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how one unauthorized light bulb ended the safest 2 years German U-boats ever had at sea and quietly forced an entire enemy fleet to change the way it crossed an ocean. How does a light beat a submarine that can vanish underwater in 30 seconds? Why did the British military already have an official solution to this funded, tested, approved, and still lose night after night? And how does a man with zero engineering background think the people whose entire job was building weapons? Because here's the part nobody believes the first time they hear it. For 5 straight months, Coastal Command flew this exact patrol, over this exact stretch of ocean, watching their radar find a U-boat and then go dark at the same distance. Every single time, not one kill. 6 aircraft lost trying. The crews had a name for it, the blind range. They could find the enemy, they just couldn't see it in time to hit it. That's the wall this story is about to tear down. By the spring of 1942, that wall had become almost a law of physics inside Coastal Command. The new airborne radar, AS Mark II, was genuinely brilliant. It could spot a surfaced U-boat from 3 or 4 miles out in conditions no human eye could manage. But underneath about a kilometer, the radar's own reflection off the sea drowned out the signal, and a kilometer was exactly the distance a bomb aimer needed to actually see the target to hit it. So crews improvised. Some dropped flares to light the U-boat manually, which also lit up the bomber for the U-boat, which dived and vanished in under 30 seconds. Others just released their depth charges blind, on a guess, and hoped. Contact, attack, failure, over and over. And the frustrating part is, the Air Ministry wasn't sitting still. They already had an answer in motion, a fixed searchlight built into the nose of a bomber. On paper it made sense. No moving parts, simple to install, hard to break. The problem only showed up in the air. Because the light couldn't turn, the entire aircraft had to be pointed dead at the U-boat for the beam to land on it, which meant flying blind on instruments until the very last second, with zero room to correct. Every senior officer backing that design had good reasons to back it. It was funded. It was further along. It was simpler. Nobody was wrong to trust it. It just wasn't going to work. And the man who's about to prove that isn't a scientist, isn't a pilot on operations, and doesn't even have a desk near the people building weapons. Wait until you hear what his actual job was. Humphrey de Verde was in his early 40s, a wing commander on personnel and staff duties at Coastal Command Headquarters. In plain English, he was the officer who processed postings and paperwork. Not weapons, not aircraft design. Paperwork. He'd flown briefly decades earlier as a young pilot in Mesopotamia in 1916. Then he left the service entirely and spent 20 years running cotton trading operations in Sudan. He didn't come back into uniform until 1939 in his 40s, with no lab, no funding line, and no authority over anything that flew. What he did have was proximity. Every returning bomber crew passed through his office to be debriefed, and he kept hearing the same complaint over and over. Radar finds it, we lose it, it dives. 20 years running a business overseas had taught him something the engineers hadn't learned yet: how to spot the gap between what a report says and what's actually happening on the ground, and to treat that gap as something you fix, not something you accept. He looked at the missing kilometer the same way: not a limitation, a problem still waiting for its answer. His idea was almost insultingly simple. If radar gets you to within a kilometer, and a kilometer is too far to see in the dark, don't fix the radar. Carry your own light, and only switch it on at the very end of the approach, after the radar's already done the hard part. Then he found something nobody else had thought to look for. Early Wellington bombers had an old gun turret slot in the belly that had been removed and never replaced. A fitting, just sitting empty. He had no funding and no permission. He never told the Air Ministry because the ministry already had its own light in the pipeline, and asking for resources to build a rival to their own project meant asking them to bet against themselves. There was no institutional reason to say yes, so he didn't ask. In March 1941, he found a spare generator left over from old mine clearing duty, bolted it to a 24-inch naval searchlight on a mount that could swing independently of the aircraft, and flew it. The first test answered the only question that mattered: a beam that could be aimed at the target without pointing the whole plane at it found, and held what the official light never could. It still almost died right there. Unfunded, unsanctioned project. Going up against the official one there was no natural path onto a single squadron's aircraft, no matter how well it worked on paper. What saved it was one man's judgment call. Air Chief Marshal Sir Frederick Bowhill saw the test results and backed it personally, on his own authority. In May 1941, the Air Ministry finally tested both lights side by side, and the verdict came down to the exact flaw that had been there from day one: the official light needed the whole aircraft aimed at the target. Leigh's didn't. Leigh's design won. It still took 9 months to actually reach a squadron. 9 months where the only thing standing between this idea and a real U-boat was paperwork, the very thing Leigh had spent his whole career drowning in. Here's the thing about a weapon that finally works on paper: it still has to survive its first night against a real submarine, with real men inside it, who have absolutely no idea what's about to hit them. The night of June 3rd to 4th, 1942, the Italian submarine Luigi Torelli is crossing the Bay of Biscay. A Wellington callsign F for Freddy, flown by squadron leader Jefferson Gresswell, picks up a radar contact at 1:27 a.m. He closes the distance. Right at the point where his screen would normally go blank, he hits the switch. The beam lands on Torelli, still on the surface, her crew with no instinct yet to dive at the sound of an engine at night. 4 depth charges straddle the hull. She's damaged badly enough her captain runs her aground on the Spanish coast rather than risk the open water. She survives. But the light just did exactly what it was built to do. The night of July 5th to 6th, a second Wellington, H for Harry, flown by an American volunteer named Wiley Howell, is over the same stretch of water. 4:40 a.m. His radar operator gets a contact at 3 miles, U-502, homeward bound from a Caribbean patrol that's already sunk 14 ships. Howell turns toward it. At a kilometer, exactly as it always has, the screen goes blank. This time, he doesn't break off. He holds his course on dead reckoning and switches on the light. The beam catches U-502 still on the surface. No warning, no time to dive. Howell releases. At 4:45 a.m., U-502 goes down. All 52 men aboard are lost. It's the first confirmed kill in history using this device. In the 5 months before that night, Coastal Command's patrols over the Bay of Biscay sank 0 U-boats and lost 6 aircraft trying. In the weeks after it, the numbers flip. By August, German crews start choosing to cross the bay on the surface in broad daylight, instead willingly trading the chance of being spotted for at least being able to see the threat coming and fight back with deck guns. The tactic that had kept them safe for 2 years, running on the surface at night to recharge their batteries and make speed, simply stops being safe. Aircraft had sunk 2 U-boats total across 1939, 1940, and 1941 combined. In 1942, the year this light went operational, they sank 31. Leigh never left his desk job. He stayed in the same personnel role for the rest of the war, was awarded the Air Force Cross, and made an Officer of the Order of the British Empire. The light that carried his name spread to liberators, Catalinas, even a biplane. By the end of 1944, Coastal Command had 119 of them fitted to Wellingtons alone. It never accounted for the majority of U-boats lost in the war. That was never really the point. What it did was quieter and more permanent than a kill count. It took away the one place German submarines had always been able to rest. And Leigh's light wasn't the only time someone outside the official chain of command quietly changed how this battle was fought. The Bay of Biscay was just one front in the fight against the U-boats, and some of the other tactics that turned the tide are just as unexpected as a paperwork officer rigging a searchlight to a bomber. If you want the rest of that story, there's a full playlist on this channel covering the Battle of the Atlantic from angles most documentaries skip. Check the link below or up on screen and pick whichever one pulls you in next.